All right. Peace, light and love. Hope everything is well with you. Give me a second here. All right. Peace, light and love. Hope everything is well with you. Give me a second here. All right. All right. Um, this is gonna be my take on the Book of Clarence, the movie. I did something earlier and I really wasn't satisfied, and I should have been more organized. I'm just getting are I'm wanting to do things, more presentations, be to go live a lot more, but I'm not satisfied with not being as thorough as possible because I skip points and I miss over certain points, and I don't want to do that here, right? So once again, to revisit the story, I went to see the Book of Clarence, with the fam, my wife, her mother, and her mother's friend, and we saw the movie. Initially, I didn't want to see it because to me I thought it was going to be more Christian propaganda, almost like what I've chopped up this series chosen to be. But it was a Black creation. Definitely wanted to support, you know, that art, so to speak, because I know that it's going to get a lot of flack out there in the mainstream world, right? And so, but here's going to be my breakdown and my take on it. I hope you can appreciate the insights. If you haven't seen the movie yet, massive spoiler alerts. I'm just going to be talking about the movie. Um, but I am going to clear up or expand upon a few of the other aspects of the movie that wasn't covered before, right? And so this is a better presentation than the one I did previously. All right, moving forward, right? So the first thing that you notice in the book, in the movie, which threw me off, and which may or may not throw you off, is the accents. This is a bad part of the movie. I mean, the actors are speaking with an accent as if though they're from West Africa and not from the Middle East. The Middle East, a Middle Eastern accent and a West African accent, or even a Caribbean accent, sounds completely different. So that's the first thing that's kind of like, okay, what's going on here? Even if you're trying to promote the African nature of the Hebrew Israelites, which I don't think it is, but if you're promoting that discussion, the accent would not be that West African accent. It would definitely be a Mediterranean Middle Eastern accent. That's going to be the first thing that you're going to notice in the movie, right? Next, what you're going to notice. So this is Clarence, right? Clarence is the twin of Thomas. Now, Thomas is known as Thomas Didymus or Didymus Thomas. And Didymus in Greek means twin. So, you know, for years, Thomas has been called the twin. And people have said the twin of who? And in some circles, people have said, oh, it's the twin of Jesus. That's some circles, that Thomas is the twin of Jesus. Uh, in this book, the portrayal of Thomas has the twin of Clarence, right? And they make a lot of reference to some of the demands that are made on the disciples when it says, leave your home, leave your mother and father. Because throughout the movie, Clarence is really upset at his twin for leaving his mother by herself. And Clarence makes repeated references to that action of Thomas. And that's a clear that's a clear well, yeah, that's a clear reference to the injunction that unless you hate your family, you cannot love me. And that Christian teaching and the dysfunction that it causes in families where people take that as a, as a discipline, as a way of life. That's what that's in reference to. The next character is this character, Barabbas, right? Barabbas is important because it's his name. Barabbas means son of the father. And in Aramaic, Barabbas in in Aramaic. Now, Barabbas is released in the story of Jesus Christ's trial in front of Pontius Pilate. Jesus is put on trial with Barabbas. Now, I guess what this movie does is give you a backstory of what Barabbas was doing before getting arrested, right? And so you could kind of look at it in that sense, right? And so then Barabbas would have been considered a vagabond, a thief, a brigand, a rebel against the Roman Empire. So he was put on trial simultaneously with Jesus, right? Now, in the trial in the Bible, when Pontius Pilate asked, "Who do you want to be released? Barabbas or Jesus?" And they say Barabbas, and when he's released into the mob, that's a symbol or a sign, that's a reenactment of Yom Kippur, right? So Barabbas is figuratively the sins of Israel. Barabbas is the pig that's released, and figuratively, Jesus, the Son of the Father, his blood is spilled to atone for the sins of Israel. So, like, this is a repetition of the Yom Kippur ceremony of Leviticus 16. In this ceremony, the priest uses divination to tell which goat to sacrifice to the Lord. Now, you got to remember that Judaism is a sacrificial religion, and sacrifices to the Lord or sacrifices to Yahweh are made all the time. And this is one of the reasons that they could exist in the ancient world versus Christians. Now, to Christians, Christ was the ultimate sacrifice, and they were not to sacrifice anymore. And so this would have the effect of weakening the power of the Jewish temple the cult had over the people. So the Jews, they were already familiar with having two sacrificial lambs and releasing one to the people and the other to God. What we have in Jesus is the same. What we have with the Barabbas is the same imagery, right? Barabbas is the son of the Father. Jesus is the son of the Father. I learned this by studying Richard Carrier's work, which is really beneficial, which is really weird considering the position that he is in now in reference to the community. But that's one idea that was pointed out to me in studying Richard Carrier, right? So in this scene, Clarence is looking to develop his plan on exactly what he's going to do in order to get out of his predicament, which is debt that he owes to another man, another Jew, which will, that has its own, issues there. So we'll cover that or talk about that another time, or check somebody else out to discuss that, right? So here we're witnessing his decision and his plans coming together to become the Messiah, right? Now he's contemplating here on exactly how he's going to do this, right? So he's calling the things that Jesus is doing tricks. So what does he do next? He decides to go to talk to Jesus' mother and father. And as he's asking them questions, they are in the movie, they're presenting a Christology that's the dominant one. Mary says an angel came upon her and impregnated her with Jesus. And in this scene, Clarence is like, "Really, bro?" But this leads into my next. So he still sees Jesus as tricks, and at this point, he sees that the conception is that Jesus was conceived still by natural means in his mind, and this brings us to the exactly what Clarence does in the movie. The conclusion that Clarence comes to is to promote knowledge over belief, to know something versus believe something. And that's his position throughout the whole film. And that becomes very interesting, right? Because when you study early Christianity, this was actually a big, big schism in early Christianity. I mean, even in Paul's letters, we have evidence of this, right? So when we look at First Timothy chapter 6, verses 20 through 21, it says, Timothy, guard what has been entrusted to your care. Turn away from godless chatter and the opposing ideas of what is falsely called knowledge. Now, I've done the Greek of this, and the Greek of this says gnosis. So, by the writing of First Timothy, I don't think this is true personally, but the scholars are saying it's somewhere written somewhere in the 60s, which it could be. However, at the time of this writing, there was a group of people who were running around talking about it is better to have knowledge than belief. Paul, and this is what Clarence is representing, this movement within early Christianity. And then you can begin to see these themes of certain Gnostic movement, Gnostic themes inside, some of their conversations. So when he's talking with Jesus's mother, she mentions a story where Jesus is making clay birds. Jesus is making birds out of clay. And then he sets those birds down and makes them real, right? Now, that is an actual story found in the Syrian Gospel of the Savior. And you can find that story in Islam as well, which makes sense because Islam is simply a heresy of Christianity. It is a Christianity that went over into Arabia where there was less jurisdiction, where Rome had less jurisdiction and there was more free expression of Christianity over there. And then they just called it Islam, right? Now, this comes out of something else that I've done, but there's a particular form of Gnosticism that Clarence seems to be repping here, and that would be the Ebionite form. So I got this out of the Panarion and Epiphanius, and when he's discussing the Ebionites, right? Who were the Ebionites? The Ebionites were an early Hebrew sect that believed in adoptionism and keeping the laws. And you see this kind of like manifesting in the Book of Clarence, because Clarence begins to say that he is the Messiah. And later on, Clarence gets a lot of these same attributes as the Messiah in the movie, right? So some of their beliefs. Christ was conceived by sexual intercourse, adherence to the law of the Sabbath, the rule about taking care not to touch a Gentile. Every day, if a man's been with a woman, he has to immerse himself in water. Moreover, he should not meet with any. He shouldn't. If he should meet with anyone while returning from his immersion, he has to go back again. He's got to constantly bathe himself to cleanse himself. Right. Here's some other. The sect forbids celibacy. For some of them, even they say Adam is a type of Christ. Others among them say that he is from above, created before all things. But he comes here when he chooses, as he came in Adam and appeared to the patriarchs clothed with Adam's body. This is their beliefs on Christ. But some may already have replied that the Gospel of John, too, translated from Greek to Hebrew, was in the Jewish treasuries. I mean, treasuries at Tiberias. So there is a lot. Now, there was a certain man named Jesus, and he was about 30 years of age, who chose us. And coming to Capernaum, he entered into the house of Simon, surnamed Peter, and opened his mouth. Okay. these are just some of the Ebionite beliefs, right? Which seems to be the particular sect that Clarence is repping here, right? Now, another point I wanted to point to was a Messiah. My Christian brothers and sisters, you have a misunderstanding in the Jewish conception of the Messiah. The Messiah from Hebrew means Mashiach, the anointed. And in Judaism, he is the expected king of the Davidic line who would deliver Israel from foreign bondage and restore the glories of its golden age. But the Messiah is also a warrior king. In your Christian conception, you have this peaceful hippie-like Messiah, which is not really Judaism's Messiah. This is why the Jews reject Christianity, because Jesus did not come and fulfill the duties of a Messiah. These other people, though, did. This right here is coming from the Wars of the Jews, book 1, verse 204, right? It's talking about a man named Hezekiah, who was a Messiah, a person who claimed to be a king, a warrior king that existed during the time of Herod. And then there are several of these types of messiahs that Josephus writes about. Here's another one, right? This is another messiah that Judas that set himself up to be king in Israel and a messiah. He was a messiah in Judaism during the Second Temple. Now, this is someone named Simon who set himself up as a messiah, right? This is all during Second Temple, the years 0 through 70, right? This was during the reign of someone named Gratus. So I just need to find out during who Gratus was in order to identify the time period, right? Here's Judas the Galilean, who's also considered to be a Messiah. And this is very interesting because I'm wondering if these were the Christians that Nero persecuted, because the procurator of Judea under Nero was Felix, who sent Eleazar and the people that was following Eleazar to Nero to be crucified. I'm wondering if if this was the group that Nero crucified and can be found said being burned at the stakes, and the Christians that Nero put on display at his dinner, because this procurator Felix sent him these Jews in order to be crucified, and Felix himself crucified hundreds of Jews at the time, because at this time during Second Temple Judaism, there was a lot of revolutionary activity on account of on the part of the Jews against the Roman Empire, right? So I'm wondering if that's what's going on. I can do more research on that level. Here's another interesting thing that happened in the movie, right? They ended up portraying John the Baptist. Now, of course, no story about Jesus can really be told without this person, John the Baptist, which is why people are believing that John the Baptist is somebody that existed. The other reason why people think that John the Baptist existed is because there is a current modern day set of Gnostics that's existed since, according to their history, they've existed from the destruction of the Second Temple to today. And if you live in Houston, Texas, you can go and visit a group of them, right? These are called the Mandaeans. They were also called in ancient times the Hermio-Baptists. They're also referred to in Islam by a name that by they're also referred to in Islam as well by people of the book, as people of the book, right? One of the other Christian sects that existed in Arabia during the time of Islam, right? Now, so interesting, right? People in the world know about these people, right? This is an article that says these Iraqis follow the last continuously surviving Gnostic religion, right? Now, something happened. There was persecutions that occurred in Arabia of the Mandaeans in the 1980s, 1990s, and there was an exodus of the Mandaean community into Texas. So if you want to know the Mandaeans and you live in Texas, you live in Houston, go visit their community. I am going to go visit them this summer at another point in time and interview them and really find out what they believe or find out their practices. One of their books is called The Right Ginza. Inside their book, The Right Ginza, Jesus is referred to as the arch deceiver, right? Because to them, John the Baptist was the Messiah, right? The last thing that I'm going to talk about that was discussed or that was shown in the Book of Clarence was being raised from the dead. And it's almost as if though people were shocked to see that Clarence was raised from the dead. Like people think that Jesus was the only person raised from the dead. And it's not. Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. And Peter raised someone from the dead as well, Tabitha or Dorcas, right? We can find this in Acts 9, verses 36 through 43. I'm going to read it for you. Now in Joppa, there was a certain disciple, Tabitha, which being interpreted means Dorcas. This one was full of God, full of good works and acts, which she was doing. And it came about in those days that having become sick, she died. And having washed her, they laid her in an upper room. Now Lydia, being near Joppa, the disciples, having heard that Peter was in it, sent out 2 men to him, urging, do not delay to come to us. And having arisen, Peter went to them. Having arrived, they brought him into the upper room, and all the widows stood near him, weeping and showing tunics. All that Dorcas was making while being with them. And Peter, having put everyone out, and having put down his knees, prayed. And having turned to the body, he said, Tabitha, rise up. And she opened her eyes. That's in Acts. Another resurrection, Eutychus, this one done by Paul, right? Acts 7. On the first day of the week, we came together to break bread. Paul spoke to the people, and because he intended to leave the next day, he kept on talking. There were many lamps in the upstairs room where they were meeting. Seated in the window was a young man named Eutychus, who was sinking into a deep sleep as Paul talked on and on. When he was sound asleep, he fell to the ground and was picked up dead. Paul went down, threw himself on the young man, put his arms around him, and said, don't be alarmed, he's alive. Then he went upstairs, broke bread, and ate. After talking until daylight, he left. The people took the young man home alive and were greatly comforted. So, in the movie, Clarence gets resurrected from the dead. And that's that throws a lot of people off because they don't associate the fact that other people get resurrected from the dead, right? One of the things that the Clarence constantly emphasizes in the book or in the movie is that you have to know that you are God. He doesn't say it like that, but that's what he's implying. And then even when someone says, so you're a believer now, he looks at them and says, no, I know. So that's my breakdown of the movie. Hope you enjoyed it. It was interestingly enough, it was a good movie. Recommend seeing it. Hope all is well and blessed with you. And I'll talk